high performance versus healthy culture, I feel like in today's day and age, we see a lot of organizations having to pick. It's like you either have a really high performing team or you have a very beautiful place where people love working, but you can't seem to have both. Is that true or false, Charles?
Oh, it's completely false. And actually, the more you read into that and the more you look into that, and if you're looking for a Google term, Google conscientious capitalism, right? Brands like Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Costco, they have a conscientious capitalism environment and structure. And what that means is they have to be profitable. Or, hey, listen, I am a capitalist. Absolutely. There has to be a profit. You can't operate a business at a loss. Not for long. Mm-hmm. A lot of people do. But yes, you need to make a profit, and that's got to be part of the equation. But what we've learned through a lot of different avenues is, first, most basically, positive reinforcement over negative reinforcement. But when you get really sophisticated with your positive reinforcement, what you realize is that's not just pats on the back. That's not just, a decent raise. It's this idea that as a leadership team and as an organization, you're actually invested in your workforce as much as you're invested in your customers, as much as you're invested in your stakeholders, as much as you're invested in your neighborhood. You have to be in those places. So what we're learning is the best performing teams are culturally driven.
Let's actually come up with some definitions here really quick. What does a high performance culture even mean?
Yeah, the way I can tell immediately upon entering any organization, whether or not they are higher performing, is what we refer to as discretionary effort. So we talked in a previous conversation about the difference between management and leadership. Management is ensuring that things get done right. Leadership is making sure we're doing the right things. Okay. So a high performing culture, you can recognize discretionary effort. And discretionary effort means people don't do things because it's a requirement. They don't operate to the minimum requirement or to the minimum expectation. They add discretionary effort. And it's discretionary because I have a choice. I can either do this or not do this. It's not going to change my pay. It's not going to change my outcome. I've already met the minimum standards, so technically I'm done. But do I feel compelled, and do I feel engaged enough, and do I feel invested enough in my organization to put in that little extra? To make that suggestion, to raise that concern, to reach out and help a coworker, whether or not it immediately benefits me. That is so obviously observable in an organization as soon as I cross the threshold.
How do you get employees to that point where they're volunteering and where they're, to the point where they're actually proactively looking to get things done because they want to get things done and they want to help people and coworkers that they're working with?
Yeah. So we all share some very simple ways to answer that question. The ultimate answer is incredibly sophisticated and complicated because, damn it, we're sophisticated and complicated, right? So the long answer is you, as the top leader, need to create the culture where people have the opportunity to do things, whether it directly impacts production or not. So Google is famous for, this program has changed a bit recently, but they were famous for saying if you were at a certain level within the organization and above, you were allowed, and I think maybe at some point, I never worked for Google, but if I'm not mistaken, I think at some point you were required to spend 10 or 15% of your time working on something that wasn't related to your job.
Mm-hmm. Now, that rings a bell.
Yeah, good. And my numbers might be off. Obviously, any listeners or watchers can correct me there. But as a general statement, they not only said, yeah, it's okay, we have this policy, but they actually required you. If you're going to contribute to the organization at this level, you need to do something besides just your job. And instead of us telling you, pick from one of these programs, why not just bring your ideas? We hired you because you're brilliant. We hired you because you love this stuff. We hired you because you're in the industry. So why not exercise your own muscles and pursue things that you think are fun and fulfilling and engaging? That's the essence of squeezing out discretionary effort. Again, I don't remember the statistics exactly, but that policy has generated hundreds of millions of dollars for Google, hundreds of millions of dollars for Amazon.
I was going to ask you, do you see leaders oftentimes getting something wrong that prevents them to ensuring that their organizations can, you know, pull through with these sort of policies?
Yeah, they roll out the policy, they roll out the initiative because, Zappos did it or because Costco did it, and they look at their valuation and say, well, I want that valuation, and this is what they do, so we're going to do it. And it doesn't have an immediate return.
Right.
This isn't a quarterly thing. And so the big joke about this is most organizations kind of operate quarterly. And that's a pretty good indicator that you are short-term focused, you are profit-only focused, and maybe you're a little fear-based, maybe you're a little desperate, maybe things aren't going so great. And you know what? We don't really have time for this discretionary stuff. We don't really have time for this collateral stuff. We got to focus on meat and potatoes here, or we're not going to be around much longer. Okay,
And
that's a crisis mode.
I was actually gonna share this with you, Charles. I actually used to work remotely for a company that would give us a $100 monthly stipend that we were required to spend every month on some sort of like exercise or activity or sport activity or something just to stay fit and healthy. Once I left that company and I moved and started looking for other jobs, it was sort of expected from my end to be able to look towards something like that in my new job. Like one of the questions that I would ask people, or the person interviewing me, was, hey, is there like a monthly stipend or something that I can spend in exercising, or do you pay for my gym membership, or do you do something to just take care of me? And the roles that didn't offer that, for some reason, they sort of lost value in my eyes. Like I don't know. It's like I like it when companies take care of me.
Yeah.
And it's something
Yeah,
as silly as just a $100 stipend.
Right. And that's a really great example of something that doesn't necessarily have a daily or even an immediate ROI.
Exactly.
What that company created for you as an employee was some stickiness. It's another factor that makes you want to stay there, and it raised your expectations. It raised your expectations that you took to, like, if you actually value me as a human being, which is becoming more and more important in this day and age, if you actually value me as a human being, then demonstrate that. Don't just say that. Don't just put it on a poster and hang it up on the wall. Espouse that value somehow. How are you demonstrating that value? I'm huge on that. You could talk a really good game. How are you demonstrating it? And as a leader, you need to be thinking about that. Oh, I love my employees and I think they're the most important thing in the world. Hey, I need a couple hours off this afternoon because my kid is graduating kindergarten. That's stupid. Nobody graduates kindergarten. Get back to work. Well, wait a minute. What did you just say? So which is it? And again, I'm not trying to make an argument that businesses exist to create this utopia for their employees. We have to get work done and we have to do it in a better way. But the most effective and the most high performing way to do that is that extra stuff.
I was going to ask you, are there any red flags that you can think of companies that may be performing well on paper, but if you start to peek around, you start noticing that things are actually starting to fall apart?
Oh yeah. As soon as I go in, I want to see your turnover numbers. I want to see the turnover rate. How many people are you hiring and how many people are leaving? Because that is the market responding to you. When you're running a company, the only market that you care about is the market that's buying your product. That's our market. Bullshit. You got a bunch of markets. Who's applying to your jobs? Who's applying to your company? Is it really high caliber people that can't wait to work for you because they've heard such great things and you have such a wonderful reputation? Or is it just worse and worse and worse and worse? And you're lowering your own internal expectations of who you're willing to hire because you don't really have the pick of the litter. It's right in your face.
Charles, what if you come across a leader that just doesn't give two shits about high turnover rates for employees?
Yeah, I would argue that that person's not a leader. That person's a manager, and what all they're doing is, there's a lot of causes to that. I don't want to call anyone out, but again, I mean, I'm respectful of the fact that some businesses are in crisis. And listen, all this stuff sounds wonderful and it's all aspirational, but at the end of the day, if I have to lay people off because we're just not making it, okay. But what I'm telling you is that level of performance is a lagging indicator for the fact that you never invested in your people. You didn't have high standards. You didn't have high expectations. And some of the best performing organizations, best performing, like ROI, margin, quality, safety, it's not because they are the highest paying company in their space or in their industry. You can create an environment where the pay is kind of secondary. And there's countless examples out there of businesses who have had to cut pay. Hey, we made a decision. We could either lay off 200 people or we could cut everybody's pay by 15%. We chose to cut everybody's pay by 15% because we're in this together. And how could I possibly pick which of you to lay off versus which of you to keep? That's an HR function. You could do that. But if you really espouse the value of everyone in this organization has value, then I'd rather keep everybody at a... And you know what? When you present that, those organizations flourish. Not always. Sometimes there are other factors. But when you present that to your employees, I could have laid off 20 of you, or I could lower everybody's pay by a certain percentage. They all come away saying, I could have been one of that 20. Let's get to work. At least we're in this together. Just an example of...
No, that makes sense. I was going to ask you, you mentioned high turnover rates for employees as a big example that things are messy. Okay, things are bad and you need to roll up your sleeves and get to work. Are there any other subtle signs that you can think of signals that may signal that, hey, things are starting to get messy but are not too bad yet, and that leaders should be paying attention to?
Yeah, one of the programs that I developed, it's AI, a software tool, but it's also has some very strong qualitative evaluations in it. Is that Tiresias program that I talk about, and what it does is it'll take some qualitative metrics like quality, cost of poor quality, returns, customer satisfaction scores, and it will really give you an overall view of what your business is doing. And it can point to, ooh, the wheels are coming off. And it'll also allow me the ability to project, okay, let's just say that somehow today you scale by 50%. Big contract, new market, whatever the case may be, something takes off and your business scales from where it is right now to a 50% increase. What's the weakest link in your organization right now that's gonna break first? That's a really strong indicator of whether or not you have systems, policies, clear expectations, the right talent in the right places. A lot of leaders and a lot of managers wish, I wish for more business. All we really need is some more revenue. Problems scale a hell of a lot faster than revenue does. So as soon as you open up that valve, like, yep, let in more customers, shit breaks. Look at the state of restaurants right now and the service industry following COVID. There are empty tables in that restaurant with a line of people outside. Why? Hey, there's a table right there and there's a table right there. Why can't I sit down? Because I have 2 servers. That's why. I can't serve more customers because the first thing that's going to break is that server cannot serve 11, 12 tables, 15 tables. Like I can't do it. Right? So that's a really obvious example of we're not ready to scale. I think revenue would fix all my problems, but no, it wouldn't. Let all those people in the door. Let them all place an order. You got 1 cook back there and 2 servers. No, your business just broke. Everybody stands up and leaves. And that's bad will, right? So,
I was thinking, are there any myths, Charles, that you can think of around high performance that you wish we could just retire for good?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This idea that high performance means you walk in the door and you're at 100% for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and then you leave and you come back and you're at that is not sustainable. And personally, from my perspective, that is not high performance, because arguably the work that we do every day isn't necessarily value added work. Okay. I don't know what the current statistics are, but arguably in an 8-hour day, I think a lot of people feedback, I do about 2.3 hours worth of actual meaningful work. That is horrifying to hear as a business leader or as a manager, but it's very, very true. And so this myth is, oh, well, I just need to drive up that number. A high performing team, I'll get 3.3 hours. I'll get 5.3 hours. And I'm pushing to get 8 hours of value add work out of every employee every day. That is theoretical. That is ideal, but that is extremely unrealistic. We can't do it physically and we can't do it mentally.
There is a leader out there listening to you right now, hearing you say that their employees are performing at their peak for 2 hours a day, that is just freaking out about what you said. What would you tell that leader?
I have an even scarier statistic there, leader. Here's the really scary statistic. And this has been proven, with studies and with research. This isn't just me throwing shit out. Take the number of employees in your organization, okay? Take the square root of that number. That's how many people are actually contributing at a very high level. And this has been proven over and over and over and over. So if you have, I'm going to use easy math here. If you have 100 people in your organization, 10 of them are doing the real work.
Which is not to say that they should fire the rest.
No. That's what Elon did at X. That's what Elon is doing in the federal government right now. And you know what? He's not wrong. He's doing it in a very harsh, very abrupt kind of way. Personally, I think he's doing it that way to make a point. So there is an argument. The way to go about that, though, is, okay, if I believe Charles here for a second and only 4 of my 16 people are operating and contributing at a very high level, you know who those 4 people are. You know who those 4 people are. So your challenge as a leader is, am I going to burn out those 4 people? Are they going to get resentful? And are they going to recognize that I have greater value and I shouldn't be carrying 12 other people and leave and really hurt you? And, okay, so what did I do? What was the misalignment in expectation, job description, head count, with why I'm able to have 12 people in my organization who don't need to contribute at a high level to get by? That's the question you need to ask yourself.
And for managers that may be a little bit stuck in the middle between, a team that is trying to perform well, but that they're not fully performing well, but they're also worried about, okay, are my workers actually happy? Do they want to continue to work here? What is a good not step by step, but maybe like a good roadmap for us to put them in, to make sure that they continue to create that sense of, hey, we need to be performing at our highest potential, but we're also trying to be realistic. Like, if there are days in which you're only going to be performing 2.3 hours a day at peak performance, that's okay. I'm not going to fire you because of that.
Yeah. Firstly, you have to have trust. You have to have trust in your organization. And trust is really built from a place of consistency and transparency and vulnerability. Right, so you can listen to Brene talk about vulnerability. I won't pretend that that's my space, but I will talk from a place of trust. Nothing happens, personally or professionally, without trust. And one of the quickest ways and one of the most important ways to build trust in your team is to be a consistent leader, which means if you don't have an internal compass and you don't believe yourself and you're trying to lead from a place of fear and scarcity, or even worse, people pleasing, you're going to be all over the board, because everybody who comes through your door is going to get a different version of you as you calibrate and adjust to match them, as opposed to leading from a place of strength and leading from a place of authenticity, and they know that they can count on that. There's a ton of military, stories I could tell about that, but the leader who is consistent is the leader who inspires followers.
You mentioned Brené. I actually watched her Netflix special. This was probably a couple years ago, and I try to watch it at least once a year, in which she goes deep into being vulnerable and vulnerability. Is there a difference, Charles, between trust and vulnerability? Do they go hand by hand? Can you get people to trust you if you're not vulnerable?
Yeah, because I think the difference between that is how much of yourself is necessary to expose. And so in a professional environment, we have this opportunity to remain slightly detached, slightly disconnected, right? I don't have to know the names of all your children and how your grandmother's doing with her treatments. I don't have to know that to be a good leader. And that's a personal choice. How involved in your personal life do I want to be and do I need to be? I don't feel in any way marginalized if my boss, my leader, doesn't know the names of my children. Like, right. And that's my personal preference. But arguably, I don't think less of that person. I don't think they care less about me because they don't know a bunch of personal details. So this idea of vulnerability, though, in a leadership role is very specific. And one of the most powerful things that's always moved me about great leaders, and one of the things I try to mirror and replicate, is when I don't know the answer. I don't know that right now. I don't know. We're looking into that. I will get you an answer to that. And then freaking do it. Do it. Get the answer and follow up with that person. You want to instill some loyalty and some trust. Your say-do ratio as a leader needs to be really high. It needs to be really high. You can get away with talking shit with your girlfriend or with your friends, like, oh yeah, we should totally do that, and then never do it. And it's like, okay, whatever, who cares? At work, especially as a leader, if you say you're going to do something, ooh, boy, you better be pushing 90, 95% in that say-do ratio. Don't say stuff that you're not going to do and that you have no intention of following through with. And if you make a commitment to someone, I don't care who they are in the organization, by the way, because everybody's watching, you had better do it. You had better follow through and do it. That do-say ratio is part of that trust building. And it's also a form of vulnerability that says, I'm okay to answer you and say, I don't know, or listen, we're struggling with this right now. I don't want to make any decisions in this really volatile time and this uncertain time. So here's what we're going to do instead. That's a form of professional vulnerability to me.
All right, we've covered one end of the spectrum. Let me ask you about the other one, which is, let's actually put ourselves in the shoes of an organization that is performing really, really, really well. And there's a leader watching us right now, and they're thinking, well, my team is running on fumes. I'm scared to let go of the gas even just a little bit because we're actually delivering really good results. But, their employees are burning out. What would you say is step one?
Yeah, so peak performance is a cycle. It's not a straight line. It's a cycle, and there has to be time and space for recovery, and there has to be a time and space for release. The peak performing teams aren't a straight line where they're constantly ascending. It's more like, the market. It's more like, the financial markets where there's volatility day to day where people take their foot off the gas day to day. But overall, in the long term, we're raising our game. We're pushing the edge. We're developing new products. We're developing new services. We're trying to deliver at a higher level. But it's not this straight line all day, every day. Where did I leave off yesterday? Let me pick up right there today. You really have to be cognizant. And this varies with the individual as well. So organizationally, you have to recognize we have to have seasons, no matter what your product or service is. There have to be seasons, and or you need to have individuals in the organization whose job it is to only worry about what's next. So many organizations, and I know this is a challenge for some, especially with the companies that I work that are like between 5 and 20 million or so in annual revenue. It's a really tricky spot because under that $5 million of revenue, you can get by with duct tape and baling wire. You can get through with just grit, especially if you're providing a product or a service. Like you can power through that and hit that amount. Over $20 million, you have such a sophisticated organization that you have the beautiful opportunity of saying, oh yeah, I have this person does that one thing. This person does that one thing. Between 5 and 20, I have found, maybe it'll expand because of AI. I've got a feeling that's going to slide up quite a bit because, I mean, you and I know organizations with 3 people or 4 people that are pushing 30, $50 million, right? So, but arguably, if you're in a service or a product industry, arguably those have kind of been the norms for me lately. Over 20 million, you have such a sophisticated organization that individuals can hold individual roles. In that range, yeah, I have an operations manager, but that operations manager is so busy, they're not necessarily looking at continuous improvement. They're not necessarily looking at process improvements. They're not necessarily looking at the customer feedback. We know it qualitatively, but who's looking at that data to drive us in the direction? We don't necessarily have someone who's looking strategically at the landscape of this industry or of our niche. So that space in between is a really challenging place for teams to remain high performing. Because if you're not looking to the future, then you're losing ground because your competitors absolutely are.
What do you think the future of leadership looks like when leaders actually get this right?
I'm extremely bullish, and I am very much half full on the future of leadership. I know things right now, specifically during recording of this conversation, there's a ton of uncertainty. There's a ton of volatility in the world, in your market, in your space, in your business, in the workforce. Oh my gosh, there's no part of our society that is untouched right now.
But if you're an optimist, Charles.
Yeah, I am.
If you're feeling bullish.
But if you look at the cycles, we all very easily kind of nod with this and then dismiss it. In times of volatility, in times of uncertainty, there's huge opportunity. Yeah, okay, whatever. If you know what it was, if you knew to buy Amazon stock, sure it was. But if you didn't, you just got screwed. That we're at a convergence right now. And if you don't recognize the convergence of the societal, the financial, the technological, everything that's changing right now, usually it's a niche. Why wasn't 20 years ago when the internet blew up, why wasn't that a convergence? Well, because socially, things were fairly stable. We were in a bit of a lull, kind of everybody went to their neutral corners and everything was okay. Financially, we had been on a tear for so long that there was a great financial outlook. So things kind of hit independently. And when they hit independently, that's not a convergence. That's not big upheaval. That's not big turmoil. Right now, with the rollout of AI, you can really look and focus and stare at AI and say, oh my gosh, that's it. It's not. It's one of several components that just happens to be emerging at the same time that we're having, an emotional and a sociological enlightening and awakening, right? Where, hey, wait, what's going on here? We're at a place financially where we are reassessing what wealth is and what it looks like. We're making breakthroughs in life expectancy and health. All these things are happening at once. And so you've got to be considering those things and how you're going to impact you. Leaders of the future are recognizing that, and they're not just trying to optimize what they were doing last week. That's the mistake I see leaders making right now, and that's my hardest push with leaders with an open mind who are willing to listen to this, is AI and the new technologies and the new apps and the new materials and it's not about optimizing what we did last time. It's about completely reassessing and reevaluating, do we even need to be doing this anymore? Okay, probably one of the most obvious analogies is Henry Ford. Henry Ford didn't optimize the saddle. Henry Ford created something that we didn't even know we needed. Right? Up until then, it was like healthier horses, faster horses, longer living horses, right? Better horse food, like optimize the horse, optimize the horse. No. Stop trying to optimize the horse. The horse has peaked. It is time to phase out the horse and usher in, motor vehicles, whatever the case may be. That's where we're at. And I don't care what industry you're in right now. Stop trying to optimize your horse. What is your horse, by the way? You should know that. Stop trying to optimize your horse and think about what the next iteration of your product or service is.
It's a great analogy, the horse one. Let me just, to wrap it up, because we've talked about the future for leaders. Let me put you on the spot here with a question for leaders of the present, which is, you brought up AI. There are a lot of organizations that are restructuring right now because, hey, the role of a lot of their employees can actually be taken care of by AI now, which means that there's a lot of employees and in my own organization, for example, that are scared. They're scared because they think that, hey, AI is coming for their job. How does a leader navigate through this time right now where they need to be, well, they can't lie to their employees, right? I mean, there are going to be instances in which, someone's job is going to be lost due to AI, but how can a leader navigate through this in a healthy way without overwhelming their employees and without creating a sense of fear amongst everyone working in that organization who is just freaking out because they don't know if they're going to be replaced by AI?
Right. Well, let me turn it back to you for 1 second and ask you, and this isn't a trick question and it doesn't have to be super, super sophisticated and complex, but what is it that AI is never going to be able to do?
I think the answer is nothing. I think it's a question about time. I think it's a question like for, in I don't want to get too specific, but for example, I know that writers right now are having a really difficult time in many different industries because, hey, ChatGPT writes pretty well, and it's cheaper than actually keeping a writer on a payroll. Video creators, for example, well, hey, Hagen is progressing pretty nicely. So is Delphi, but it's not quite there yet. Now, are we going to be able to replace video creators in 2 to 3 years? 5 years? Probably. I don't know that there's a function in today's society that can't be done better by AI. I don't know. Maybe genuine conversations like the one that we're having right now will never be able to be replaced by AI, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So until AI achieves sentience and starts thinking for itself and asking itself questions, AI is completely dependent on us.
Because it doesn't create anything. Okay, I'll give you that one.
So one of our discussions is about the quality of your questions. Okay? If you're a leader, and again, this is really going to drive home this whole idea of optimizing. If you're a leader and you think you're using AI in your business because you say, how do I do this better? AI is going to give you an answer, but it's only in the context of what you asked it. So if you just say, I'll go even simpler. How do I make $1 million? Well, kill 20 people, take their livers. Well, hang on. Let's find another way. You have to be more specific. How do I make $1 million doing this thing that I do? How do I make $1 million with my skill set or in alignment with my purpose? Oh, okay. Now you're going to get a more specific answer. Okay. But AI is 100% dependent on us right now for input. That's why when you open up Chat or Grok or any of them, there's an input field. You have to ask it. So what's missing is it's this hugely powerful thing. Back to the vehicle analogy. It is an absolute total beast of an Audi RS6 Avant. 700 horsepower, all-wheel drive. But it just sits there. Even if it's turned on and it's idling, it does not go anywhere without a driver. Okay? I know there's driverless vehicles. It's not part of this analogy. Stop it. Get off it. But It's just sitting there. So it needs us, and it's going to be incredibly powerful. But the days of it, like, I'm going to give you an input and I want you to run my business while I'm not here overnight, those things are pretty horrible right now. So if you're a leader and your team or your organization is worried that AI is coming, abso-freaking-lutely. It absolutely is. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The first image that popped into my head when you said that was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And if you remember, Charlie's father worked in like a toothpaste factory.
And he got fired.
He put the caps on the toothpaste.
And then they got replaced by a machine. Yeah.
He got replaced by a robot, and the robot did it. And it did it faster and it did it quicker. So what did he do?
He became the repairman, right?
Okay. So ask AI. Listen, AI is a wonderfully, amazingly aspirational thing that's going to change our society. Yay. But what it's also going to do is it's going to drive a wedge between the top and the bottom. The Industrial Revolution, this already happened. Machines are bullshit. Assembly lines are bullshit. I'm not doing it. I'm going to make one chair at a time. It's going to take me 3 weeks to make that chair, and it's going to be the best chair ever. Guess what? You're right. It was a better chair than the one they made at the factory, but guess what? They made 10,000 a day, and they sold them for $1, and you're trying to sell one chair for $10,000. You're out of the game, buddy. You're out of the game. I'm sorry. You have to look at yourself and your life through that lens, which is how can I have to acknowledge AI's existence, at least to ask, what are my competitors doing?
I think that, to put you a little bit on the spot here, Charles, I think you're giving employees a really good answer, which is, hey, acknowledge the fact that AI is here and it may very well take your job indeed. But I think I really want you to get a little bit more specific about what do you tell leaders to communicate their employees right now, if there's even anything that they can communicate, or how do you at least try to create a sense of, I don't know, man. It's like, how do leaders react to the fear that their employees are going through right now?
Yeah. I have teams that I manage, project managers in particular. Let's sit down. I had a round table with them. We have to be careful with this, but how is AI going to disrupt? Fill in the blank. That's a great thing to ask AI. Actually, yeah. You don't need to ask me that question. Sit down and ask chat, how is artificial intelligence, machine language, large language modeling going to impact X? My industry, my business, this role within my organization. What are the impacts? Oh, okay, well, we're going to do this really well, but it's really what it's going to do is it's just going to move this from here to here, and humans are just going to be a little further upstream. Okay, hey team, come here. Here's the development. And do I want to keep these people, or do I see like a huge benefit? And yeah, I guess I don't need those people anymore, or maybe I need them fractionally. There's several people, several clients who I coach right now have kind of faced this. My role, the organization is shifted and changed, and there's no longer a position for me at $250,000 a year to do this thing. And it's not necessarily because AI was a direct replacement, but it's because of other efficiencies and other scales within the organization that I'm just not needed at $250K. I need to replace that job. Well, you can't. You're not going to be able to replace that job. So think fractionally. And when I go through this work with those clients, it was like, well, maybe you don't need one job that pays $250,000 a year. Maybe what you need is 4 jobs that pay $75,000 a year or $100,000 a year, because you're acting fractionally. And if you have significant value to add to organizations and to contribute to organizations, that becomes a much better conversation to have with an organization. Hey, I know you don't want to hire me full time. You probably don't need me any full time because you're leveraging AI to do a lot of the grunt work, but I do have 20 or 30 years of experience, strategic experience and connections in this industry that could be of huge value to you. Would you pay for 3 months of my time or 4 months of my time, aggregated over a year? Or I'm not saying become a full consultancy, right, but a lot of organizations, so the organization itself is thinking that way, like, ooh, maybe we just need these roles fractionally. But that's also an opportunity. You can look at that as half empty and like, shit, I lost my job. Or you could look at that as a huge opportunity, which is, wow, now I get to have 3 jobs with 3 different organizations, with 3 different opportunities to grow and develop. Ooh, that could be a huge opportunity for you if you enjoy that.
Do you think that could be the tone of line that leaders can start implementing in their organizations? Telling their workforce that, hey, just because AI is doing a big chunk of your job now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get fired. You just have more time to do other things and to contribute in different ways to our organization.
Yeah, but back to the original point that I was trying to make about AI currently being very passive. What can you do with your time? Well, you could leverage AI to think more strategically. You and I have done that type of work together already. We leverage AI heavily in what we do, but ultimately we have the initial spark of the idea, and then we synthesize all that data and all those patterns into what actually makes sense for us. So we're doing, I think, I mean, when we work together, the 2 of us are doing the work of, 10 years ago, how many people would it take to do what you and I do together? It would take 1,000 people.
I don't even think we could be able to do it.
Right.
But
right. I'd be broke, or I'd be very stuck. I'd be very plateaued right now in my business because I would have more ideas and more work than revenue, because that's leading. You got to do the work first, and it's a cycle. But with AI, we're able to put that work out there and and exercise those ideas and test those things very, very quickly in a way that generates revenue for next to zero, and then invest heavily in that space after it's a proven concept. So any leader out there in any business, in any industry, could do exactly that. Hey guys, we need to run this. Like let's do a workshop for 4 hours on Friday afternoon. Do the classic, bring in some pizzas and some sodas, and let's sit down and let's put AI up on the big screen, and let's help each other develop prompts to that. Oh, hey, think about this. Actually, don't forget about this. The quality of what you get from AI is indicative of the quality of your question. And we alone, if I go do something alone, I get an output, and then I share it with you, and what happens? It gets tweaked. It gets enhanced. It gets a new perspective. So if you have a room of 4 or 5 or 6 of your people, of your team, and we're all collaborating to ask a better question, holy crap. Now you just spent 4 hours with 6 people and you got a quarter's worth of ideas or a solution that you wouldn't have thought of that, may have taken much, much longer.
I think that to wrap it up, Charles, I just want to ask you one last question, and you don't have to give me a super long answer. So between high performance and having a healthy culture, do you really need to choose?
No. In fact, I would argue that you can't have either without the other. You can't be high performing without a good culture. And if you have a good culture, you're going to become high performing.
I guess I'll talk to you next week.
Awesome.